We live in an age of oversimplified narratives, from politics to economics to every discipline. Think of 2017 Tax Cuts and Job Act, which promised to stimulate investment and increase wages through significant corporate tax reductions. However, the subsequent analysis showed that the government deficit spiraled out of control and expected benefits did not materialize. It was because of the oversimplified narration told by the mainstream economists, which utterly ignores and always ignores the elephant in the room, the complexity. If you see someone advertising an all in one solution to a complex problem, whether it's obesity, organizational culture, simple growth tricks, or a single pill to swallow for the economy, take a step back because almost all of the time they feed you with the grand narrative of the miraculous, as Pierre Bourdieu referred to, which is an indispensable part of our current discourse. You have to believe that you can be the 1% elite so that the current system can run. But here is the caveat: simplicity oftentimes comes with unexpected costs, and most of the time they are irreversible. Of course, this doesn't mean that simple cannot be elegant and effective. Sometimes you do find a straightforward solution, but you'll rarely discover that without a proper exploration across multiple thinking modes and models, which is what I will talk about in this video. Welcome to our part 2 of Systems Thinking series, where we started a journey to unfold the world around us through trying new lenses and frameworks. The title, Transform Your Thinking, the future of problem solving in a complex world, isn't just a catchy headline. It's a call to evolve the way we think about challenges, and that's why I started this series. In part 1, we explored the essence of what a problem is, how our cultures are centered around it, how a problem is recognized, and how our internal processes lead us from problem identification to seeking solutions. We touched on why systems thinking is superior for dealing with complexity, especially as AI evolves and starts handling less complex tasks day by day, and as we are pushed to solve even more complex problems. Let's quickly recap what we have discussed in the part 1. We explored how the word problem evolved through time, beginning from meaning throwing for a situation to meaning something that is hard to deal with, and how our understanding of complexity is closely tied to the use of the word problem. And then we discussed that as AI becomes more and more capable of dealing with some lesser complexity problems, maybe the problem can finally detach from its cognitive connection to meaning hard to crack. And we propose a better definition for the problem, which stated a problem is essentially a gap between our current state and a desired state, influenced by both environmental changes and mindset changes. And then we saw how recognizing a problem involves attention, often triggered by discomfort, and then leads to prioritization and solution thinking. And finally, we introduced systems as interconnected sets of elements with a purpose, boundaries, and relationships which complex problems can be nestled in. Today, we are digging deeper into the approaches we use to tackle problems. But before that, let me clear one thing first. We defined problem as a gap, but articulating that gap can be exhausting. And one essential method I frequently use to articulate a gap is awareness understanding matrix, or sometimes it's called known unknown matrix. It simply dissects everything into 4 buckets. They are things you are aware and understand. They are known knowns, your knowledge or facts. Things you are aware and don't understand. They are known unknowns, your assumptions, your questions. Things you are not aware but understand. They are unknown knowns, your intuitions or biases and things you are not aware and don't understand. They are unknown knowns, your explorations and risks. This matrix will be handy when deciding which thinking approach to use while dealing with the problem, because you need to put as much as relevant knowledge for your problem into known buckets, and usually you start with some unknowns when you have a problem in your hands. Obviously, most of us grew up in an education system that excels at reductionist thinking, which is perfect thinking mode if you have known unknowns. But we know complex problems are not. That's why businesses put money to train their employees their networks of human intelligence, which are their core capital, with generative thinking approaches like design thinking to innovate effectively, and sometimes added to their selection a more comprehensive systems thinking approach to fill the gaps, usually in engineering related industries, because these two thinking modes are better at the other buckets. We will look at each of these thinking methodologies and try to understand where to use them separately and collectively when we encounter a problem. Let's begin with the reductionist thinking. It's what most of us learned from day one in school. Take any problem and break it into sub-problems and more sub-problems and sub-sub-problems, and every part you can't break into, and isolate those variables, use formulas, analyze and solve each piece independently. Then reassemble those parts to hopefully solve the problem you begin with. It is highly effective when the problem is well defined, linear, and has known unknowns. That is, you tacitly and explicitly know what needs to be found out, and that is, you are aware of them but don't know yet. Like solving a straightforward math equation or diagnosing why a single machine part is broken. And when you can ignore feedback loops and interdependencies without missing too much of the bigger picture. Think of the Newtonian physics as the poster child of this reductionism. Calculating motion using mass and acceleration is straightforward. As a matter of fact, reductionist thinking methodology is closely tied to the idea of modernism because it has its roots in the age of enlightenment, but roll forward to today, where the real world frequently harbors hidden elements like intangible cultural norms, emerging technologies like AI's evolving capabilities. These don't always lend themselves to a purely reductionist approach. Yet, despite its limitations, reductionist thinking remains crucial for quick and focused problem solving in well-defined areas, as we said, and situations where precision and isolated testing matter more than broad interplay, like debugging a code in a software, or fixing a single machine part, or precision manufacturing. I won't dig down into reductionist thinking because I'm sure you are perfectly practicing it every day. But what if the problem is fuzzy, cross-disciplinary, or constantly changing? That's when we need to move beyond reductionism. One approach is generative thinking. As businesses, markets, communities, and technology become more interconnected, the world we live become more complex than ever. And our classical reductionist thinking falls short when addressing these new business problems that are often difficult to define and isolate. When and how generative thinking emerged as a distinct school of thought is debatable, but I tend to connect it with creative thinking, which has its roots in the Bauhaus movement of the early 20th century of Germany. At Bauhaus, engineers, designers, artists, and philosophers come together to solve the challenges of rapid industrialization and increasing urban complexity. And later in the 20th century, this approach evolved into design thinking, which significantly influenced the digitalization of this physical world. And Beyond increased complexity, we also face constant business disruptions, and these disruptions, combined with an hunger for innovation in the knowledge economy and the limitations of reductionist thinking, paved the road for an alternative approach, one that questions hierarchies and embraces a decentralized thinking, and that is generative thinking. It is not just about problem solving, it's about problem framing and possibility exploration. It operates on a cyclical, exploratory, and emergent framework rather than a linear step by step approach as in the reductionist thinking. While reductionist thinking seeks to dissect problems into well defined parts and systematically addresses the known unknowns, generative thinking thrives in uncertainty, and it is to handle unknown unknowns. Here is how. Instead of starting with a predefined problem, generative thinking encourages broad exploration. It embraces ambiguity and asks bold what if questions to uncover hidden assumptions through research, brainstorming, and challenge the status quo and generate radically different perspectives. Based on those research and different perspectives, we start to make scenarios because unknown unknowns cannot be defined upfront. Scenario planning is an important step. By designing multiple, often contradictory feature scenarios, generative thinking stress tests assumptions and prepares for a wide range of possibilities. And based on those scenarios, generative thinking focuses on creating the think rather than thinking before creating. In business, this means rapid prototyping, simulations, or speculative design to make the unknown tangible and refine it through iterations. And based on those iterations, instead of seeking fixed solutions, generative thinking builds learning loops that adapt over time. Insights from prototypes, experiments, failures, and iterations shape the next steps, making the process organic rather than deterministic, and paves the road for further divergent exploration in the future. And unlike traditional approaches that define a problem before solving it, generative thinking thrives on the premise that the most critical challenges aren't visible at the start. By reframing, prototyping, and exploring emerging patterns, it reveals hidden opportunities in complexity. Where reductionist thinking asks, how do we solve this problem? Generative thinking asks, what are we missing? What if the problem itself is incomplete? You can find a great deal of material and knowledge on design thinking, a branch of generative thinking, because it was heavily commercialized. For example, I had been trained for design thinking when I was working for corporations like 10 years ago. Today, there are also many YouTube channels covering this topic for free, so just check them. How does generative thinking connects to reductionist thinking? First, generative thinking complements reductionist approaches by uncovering novel possibilities you might miss if you stay locked in a single problem statement. And second, after you have generated a variety of creative solutions and moved some unknowns to known unknowns, you can apply reductionist methods to refine and test each idea's feasibility and reach to known knowns. But creativity alone isn't enough. What if your new product or strategy conflicts with other elements in your organization or in general population or triggers unintended effects elsewhere? Enter systems thinking. In part 1, we emphasize that systems thinking is about recognizing and managing complexity. It goes one step further than generative thinking by ensuring ideas and the problems they address are evaluated in the context of interconnected environments and tries to unfold complexities embedded in those systems, and fills everything in the awareness understanding matrix by including unknown knowns deliberately so that you can design system level solutions and implement it. Let's look at the methodology. This diagram summarizes the methodology, and actually it gives us the agenda of the next 6 episodes of our system thinking series. If you don't want to miss what's coming, subscribe to the channel now and ring the bell button. As seen here, systems thinking starts with preliminary systems understanding and seeks the answers for: are there any systems relating to this problem, and what are they, and how do they play with each other? To find, you have to bring all the research, data, information, and experience together to craft and understand the system's purposes or functions, boundaries, elements, and potential relations among them and between each system and each subsystem. Think of this step as sketching the picture of the current state. There are many methods used in this step, like network maps, system maps, function means analysis, or context diagrams, and we will walk through some of them during our systems thinking series. In this step, you can also seek help from common AI services like Gemini or ChatGPT to cover all aspects of the systems here. Next step is problem identification. As you sketch the current state, you will start to see how the problem might evolve from those connections, and it helps your assumptions, questions, intuitions, and biases become explicit. Based on your first draft, you should clarify what should be your desired state and identify every gap. And once again, we have tools for this step as well, and we will cover some of them in this series. Once you identify the problem clearly, now you can start to conceptualize the systems you sketch around your problem. You can draw causal loop diagrams, policy structure diagrams, or use other visualization tools to see how components influence each other. One of the most critical steps here is identifying both tangible and intangible parts of the system, like budgets, processes, corporate culture, or human behaviors, which significantly sets systems thinking apart from other thinking methodologies. Once you are okay with the concept you have, you can test, stimulate, and validate the robustness of your concept. You can build stock and flow diagrams and run what-if scenarios, or you can design small-scale experiments on the field to check its cohesion and dispel your doubts about the systems you design. This is where you might integrate some generative thinking mode to create what-if scenarios. As you validate, you can start to ideate solutions, policies, or decisions to evaluate multiple interventions. And to do this, we look for leverage points, areas where a small change can yield big results. There are 10 plus leverage points in a system, and each has its own impact factor. We will talk about in detail in the next episodes. And at this stage, you can go back and forth between simulation and validation stage as you come up with new ideas. This step is also great for activating generative thinking mode. And once you decide for the solution package, you plan to roll out your chosen interventions and start implementing. Keep in mind that there will be potential side effects or stakeholder reactions, so you might need to improve decisions by going back or update your system's understanding regularly and complete the circle repeatedly. Actually, this is a never-ending process because systems are dynamic structures, and as you can remember from the part 1, problems are prone to be affected by environmental changes and mindset changes, which happens frequently in many systems, right? And also, systems thinking takes problems and expands them, uncovers their hidden connections, and shows you the hidden spots where generative ideas might plug in and cause ripple effects to ensure we don't repeat the pitfalls of focusing solely on the quick fixes that lead to more issues down the road. These are the 6 steps of systems thinking methodology, and over the next 12 weeks we will cover key concepts in these steps bi-weekly. So, how reductionist, generative, and systems thinking interrelate to each other. Let's go back to our awareness versus understanding metrics to understand how these 3 approaches work as a continuum. In this matrix, known knowns are your knowledge and your solutions reside in this bucket. So you have to reach that bucket for the solution. That means you have defined your gap between current state and desired state in terms of awareness and understanding. If you are 100% sure that you have everything within the boundaries of the problem, that is, the problem you are dealing with has a deterministic nature, like broken physical machines, it means that you know all the unknowns. Then reductionist thinking mode should be your selection because it helps you isolate and deeply understand one piece of the puzzle at a time. But if you are not sure that you have every known unknowns, or if you thought that you have all the known unknowns, but after solving for them you saw that your solutions were not working as expected, then you need to go for generative thinking to explore the world of unknown unknowns, because it encourages you to create and explore multiple potential solutions and future states, often in a collaborative, user-centered way. And if you are sure that you are dealing with a complex problem, your best shot is systems thinking, because it ensures from the very start that you are looking at all the buckets, all the interconnected pieces, and it prevents you from unintended consequences and reveals optimal leverage points. Although all these modes seem completely different, historically we kind of built them on each other. One great example to show the evolution of our thinking modes is how we approach the mental health problems through time. Before the Enlightenment, those labeled as mentally unstable were often locked away, sometimes in prisons or asylums or dungeons, without much hope for genuine care, right? And during medieval times and earlier, mental illness was frequently seen through a lens of superstition or moral failing, leading to confinement rather than treatment. Then, as enlightenment began to take root with an emphasis on reason and empirical observation, the reductionist approach emerged. Pioneers like Philippe Pinel in France began to question the old methods. Instead of merely imprisoning the mentally ill, he attempted to isolate and address specific symptoms. For example, he is well known for unchaining patients at his hospital, an act that symbolized a move toward more humane treatment, even if the remedies like bloodletting were still far from today's standards. These early experiments, although limited and sometimes misguided, marked the beginning of a shift towards understanding mental health as a condition with identifiable parts, setting the stage for more integrated approaches like psychotherapy or psychoanalysis, which were the products of generative thinking. And fast forward to today, systematic thinking has become the cornerstone of mental health practice by integrating insights from neuroscience, psychology, sociology, neurology, and patient experience. Contemporary strategies aim to address mental health challenges in a holistic, evidence based manner that adapts to the complex realities of human well being. This construction of thinking modes since the Enlightenment was not sporadic to mental health, it was frankly a pandemic across all the disciplines, which led to both understanding of this world and making it more complex. And now we have reached a complexity level that a single human brain is not capable of understanding them all. Nevertheless, in a world where machines handle routine tasks and AI solves some complicated problems, our human advantage will lie in combining these three approaches to tackle bigger, more complex issues, just as we started to explore in part 1. We will continue to delve deeper into systems thinking in the upcoming videos. Next episodes will focus on systems understanding, and we will uncover each of these 6 steps in systems thinking methodology in the upcoming episodes, as I said earlier. During our journey, we will also look for how to integrate AI while thinking in systems and look into some real world problems to exercise. If you haven't already, be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next dive into the power of holistic, multidimensional thinking. Until then, remember, when complexity calls, don't settle for clear, simple, and wrong answers. You are capable of the broader spectrum of thought. See you and take care.